My greetings to everyone. In the ongoing series of Art of Being Happy, today we will be discussing on culture and happiness. The culture defines myths, legends and supernatural. Indeed, a society's myth, folklore and superstitious beliefs are greatly influenced by its culture. Now these cultural components are impacted and developed by the shared beliefs, ideals and traditions of a group of people. So basically the myths and the legends and the beliefs, they are all supernatural and the culture provides the behavior patterns and the guiding behavior. Now the provision of the behavioral patterns and the direction of a behavior within a community are significantly influenced by the culture. Individuals acquire and internalize these behavioral patterns through the process of socialization which takes place within the framework of the culture. Now, the social norms and expectations, the socialization, the role expectations, the social expectations, etc. play a significant role. Now let us talk about the institutional and organizational culture. Now beyond influencing the personal behavior, the culture has an impact on how institutions, organizations and the corporates behave. Every company creates its own distinct culture which serves as a moral compass for its employees and unites them around the common goals and ideals. It is critical to understand that culture is not a static thing, that the behavior patterns can change over time as a result of a variety of variables, including intercultural exchanges, globalization, and the technological improvement. Additionally, individuals may not always adhere strictly to our cultural norms as a personal characteristics, experience, and individual choices. They also influence the behavior. However, the culture continues to have a significant role in dictating the social norms and the behavior patterns. The next is your culture imposing limits on the human activities and promoting a social order. A society's culture is very crucial in establishing the restrictions on the human behavior and fostering a social order. These restrictions and rules are set by the cultural norms, beliefs and traditions, which offer standards for the proper conduct and interactions. Here is how the culture does it. The first is your norms and expectations in behavior. The cultural norms specify the accepted rules of a conduct in a culture. They encourage the ordered and predictable interactions by outlining clearly what people should do in the various scenarios. The cultural norms may establish the guidelines for greetings, showing respect and appropriate social behavior, for instance, the social control. By instilling a sense of what is considered acceptable and unacceptable within a group, the culture acts as sort of a social control. People follow the cultural norms and uphold the social order out of a fear of social rejection or marginalization. Now, setting the boundaries. The cultural norms and traditions aid in establishing the boundaries that demarcate a proper conduct. These restrictions on behavior, they help in maintaining a stable and cohesive community by defining the bounds of acceptable conduct and preventing certain behaviors from being transgressed. For a society to function and to be cohesive, it must impose the restrictions on the human behavior and foster the social order through cultural norms and values. Now, these cultural factors support and maintain the social harmony, the control of behavior, and the preservation of the cultural identity. Effective cross-cultural communications and the courteous relationships in the varied societies, it depends on an understanding of an adherence to the cultural norms. Next we have is a relationship between society, culture, and personality. A complex web of connections exists between society, cultural, and personality. Understanding how these three factors interact and shape one another is essential to comprehending the human behavior and the dynamics of social relationships. Here's a very closer look at how society, culture and personality are related. Let us first talk about society and culture. A particular group of people's shared ideas, values, norms and conventions, traditions and behaviors are known as their culture. On the other hand, the collection of people residing together inside a specific social framework is referred to as a society. A society operational framework is provided by a culture. It sets the social standards, laws and expectations that direct people's action and interactions in the society. Next is your society and personality. The social setting that allows for an expression and interaction of individual personalities is provided by society. People's personality development and expression are influenced by institutions, social structures, and the roles that makes up a society. The social norms, the social roles, and the expectations, they all influence the behavior and the characteristics that are through acceptable in a given community. The personality traits and the features are all formed as a result of socialization process that take place within a family, educational system and community. The individual personalities are significantly shaped by the culture. Individuals internalize the cultured norms, beliefs and behavior of their society through the process of socialization. The personality traits, the behavioral tendencies are influenced by cultural beliefs. The cultural perspectives on emotions, the self-expression and interpersonal interactions, they have an impact on how people form the identities and connect with one another. A person's self-concept and self-esteem can also be shaped by a cultural influence. For the purpose of recognizing and diversity of the human societies and fostering a cross-cultural understanding and empathy, it is very essential to comprehend how society, culture and personality interact. The complexity and the depth of the human civilization around the world are a result of the interaction and effect of each element on the others. Next is your cultural values and happiness. The cultural values are society's ideas, principles, customs and practices. Now these ideals shape that cultural identity through guiding its members' behavior. The socialization passes along the cultural ideals which differ by the culture. They influence the people's world view, decisions and priorities. Now happiness is a personal, positive emotional state that people feel when they believe their lives are important, fulfilling and satisfied. It involves a feeling of joy, satisfaction and well-being. While it is true that happiness is frequently accompanied by a positive feelings, people's levels of happiness can actually change depending on a variety of external and internal conditions. How the cultural values impact the individual well-being. Individual well-being can be significantly impacted by the cultural values. The cultural context in which people live has a big impact on how they perceive and experience well-being. Now, following are some of the ways in which the cultural values may affect a person's well-being. The first is your sense of belongingness. The cultural values frequently place an emphasis on a person's connection to a sense of belonging within a family or a group. People may feel more backed up, safe, and emotionally linked in societies that place a high value on strong social ties, which can enhance the general well-being. Next is your social support. In times of struggle or stress, the culture that emphasizes a close-knit social network and extended family structure tend to provide more social support. Now, this network of support can actually protect against the negative life occurrences and have a very good impact on one's mental and emotional health. Next is your attitude toward the wellness. The cultural beliefs pertaining to wellness activities can have an effect on one's physical well-being. The prevention actions and holistic health strategies may produce a better overall health outcomes in cultures that prioritize them. It's very crucial to remember that the cultural values are just the ideas and the practices that reflect the values of a specific culture. They are neither inherently good or bad. However, when the cultural values collide with those of the other cultures, or when they impair the welfare of certain members of a culture, they may cause the difficulties or the conflicts. It is very essential to comprehend how the cultural values affect an individual's well-being in order to develop the interventions and a support system that are both culturally aware and successful. The societies can actually seek to promote the health and the happiness of every member by acknowledging and respecting the many cultural views. Then we have is the cultural dimensions affecting the happiness. The cultural dimensions, they explain how the culture differ across the social and psychological elements. Now, these dimensions define how people's views and pursue the well-being in their culture, while can affect the happiness. The researchers have identified several cultural characteristics that affect the happiness, including the collectivism versus individualism. Now, this dimension describes how much a culture promotes the community harmony, interdependence, and collective well-being or collectivism versus the individual aims, independence, and self-expression, that is individualism. Individualistic cultures may place more emphasis on the personal success and happiness, whereas collectivist societies place more emphasis on contented relationship and upholding the communal communities. Masculinity versus femininity. The emphasis that a culture places on assertiveness, competition, and material success, that is masculinity, against nurturing, cooperation, and the quality of life, that is femininity, is reflected in the dimension of masculinity versus femininity. The high levels of masculinity may place a higher priority on accomplishments and professional success as a source of happiness, whereas high levels of femininity may place a higher importance on interpersonal relationships and work-life balance. The long-term versus the short-term orientation. This component assesses a culture's future orientation and how much it values the long-term planning and tenacity versus short-term gratification and the rituals. The short-term culture prioritizes the present delight and the culture traditions, while long-term cultures invest in future happiness. It's very critical to understand that the cultural variations exist both inside and between the countries, and that these culture characteristics are generalizations, and in addition to individual differences, the culture has a big impact on how people perceive the happiness. Understanding these cultural aspects can really help us better understand how the different culture groups' experiences of pleasure and the well-being are shaped by cultural values and conventions. Next is your cultural influences on emotional expressions. The culture has a significant impact on how people express and interpret their emotions. Each culture has its own distinct set of norms, values, and the social expectations that govern the acceptable emotional displays. In some of the cultures, individuals are encouraged to express their emotions openly, whereas in others, emotions reserve and stoicism may be valued. And in addition, certain norms influences which emotions are deemed desirable or acceptable in specific situations. Now, some cultures may place a premium on individualistic emotional responses, whereas others place a premium on communal or group-oriented expressions. Now, let us talk about how the cultural norms shape the way the emotions are expressed. The manner in which emotions are expressed and experienced in a society is significantly influenced by the cultural norms. Now, these norms influences how individuals convey their emotions and how others perceive them. Now, here are several significant ways that the cultural norms influence the emotional expression. The first is your display rules. Display rules are the guidelines for acceptable emotional experience and expression in a variety of social contexts that are governed by the cultural norms. While certain cultures may value emotional reserve and solitude over the outraged displays of emotions, the others may encourage them. These guidelines explain appropriate ways for the people to express emotions like happiness, sadness, rage, and fear. The emotional vocabulary. The words and the phrases used to describe these emotions differ between the cultures. Some languages may have emotionally nuanced the vocabularies, whereas the others may lack such linguistic distinctions. Now, this may impact how people perceive and experience the different emotional states. Next is your emotional intensity. Depending on the circumstance, the right amount of emotional intensity may be determined by the cultural standard, while other cultures may encourage more expressive and vibrant emotions. Some may favor more restrained emotional displays. It's very critical to understand that the cultural norms for emotional expression aren't intrinsically good or bad. They're just different. Understanding and accepting the cultural differences in emotional expression is very, very essential for cross-cultural communications and empathy. Individuals may also adopt different emotional patterns from different cultural sources, resulting in complexities and variances in how emotions are portrayed in multicultural environments. The cultural variations in emotional display rules and their impact on happiness. How individuals experience and express the happiness is profoundly influenced by the cultural differences in emotionally displayed norms. Display rules are the cultural norms and expectations regarding the acceptable methods to express the emotions in a social setting. These rules can vary considerably across the cultures and have the following effects on our understanding and expression of happiness. The first is your outward expression versus internalized experience. And now in the cultures that value the outward emotional experience over the internalized experience, individuals are actually encouraged to express their pleasure openly. Now, typically, these cultures celebrate happy occasions with exuberant displays of emotions, fostering a sense of communal celebrations and a shared pleasure. The next is your tolerance for positive emotions. Some cultures may limit the expression of positive emotions such as happiness out of concern that excessive displays of happiness can result in a negative consequence such as a J factor. Yes, we are talking about jealousy or an evil eye. As a result, people in such cultures may downplay their pleasure in order to protect themselves or others from envy or a harm. The next is your influence on social interactions. The cultural differences in emotional display. Norms can actually influence the social interactions and the communication styles. In cultures where outward displays of happiness are expected, individuals may actively seek out the opportunities to share their happiness and celebrate with others, resulting in a stronger social bond. Understanding the cultural differences in emotional display regulations is very critical for developing a cross-cultural understanding and empathy. Recognizing and valuing the varied emotional expressions can actually lead to a more effective communication and supportive relationships in a variety of cultural contexts, ultimately improving an overall happiness and the well-being. Next we have is the cultural factors affecting the subjective well-being. Subjective well-being, which is an individual self-assessment of their overall contentment and life satisfaction, is significantly influenced by the cultural factors. These include the cultural norms, values, social support network, and the perception of pleasure and the success. In collective cultures that value the social harmony and interconnectedness, subject well-being may be closely attached to the family and community ties. Individualistic cultures, in contrast, may place a premium on the personal accomplishments and self-fulfillment, influencing how individuals evaluate their own well-being. The next is your cultural determinants of life satisfaction and subjective well-being. Different societies, life satisfaction and subjective well-being are profoundly influenced by the cultural factors. These cultural factors influence how people perceive and evaluate their overall happiness, contentment, and life fulfillment. So here are some important influential factors on the subjective well-being. The first is coping techniques in the different cultures. The cultural coping strategies include seeking a social support, engaged in religious practices, practicing mindfulness, participating in rituals, and relying on traditions or for guidance. The effectiveness of these coping techniques depends on their alignment with the cultural values and beliefs. The next is your perceptions of success and happiness. The definition of success and happiness differ greatly across the cultures. As indicators of success, some cultures place a premium on material affluence and the status, whereas others may place a premium on spiritual fulfillment, family harmony, or leisure time. Individuals' perceptions of their own well-being can be influenced by their divergent views on what constitutes a satisfying existence. Next is your cultural resilience. The cultural practices that foster the resilience and coping mechanisms during the difficult times can actually contribute to a greater life fulfillment. This may include the traditional rituals, spiritual beliefs, or communal support in certain times of adversities. Now, it is actually very critical to recognize that the cultural factors of life satisfaction and subjective well-being are diverse and multifaceted. Individual characteristics, life situations, and environmental factors, they all interact with them. Understanding these cultural variables is very critical for fostering the happiness and devising the culturally appropriate therapies to improve the life satisfaction in varied societies. Next is your socio-cultural factors contributing to happiness levels. The socio-cultural factors contribute significantly to the satisfaction levels of individuals and communities. These factors comprise a vast array of the social and the cultural elements that influence how individuals perceive and experience the happiness. So here are some most important influential socio-cultural factors on happiness. The first is your social support systems. The robust social support network are actually very essential for contentment. The happiness level tend to be greater in cultures that place a very premium on innate family ties, friendships and community ties. The social promote overall health for promoting the emotional solace, a sense of belonging and assistance during the difficult circumstances. The next is your social trust and cohesion. Societies with the higher levels of social trust and cohesion tend to be more happier. Next we have is the freedom and autonomy. Societies that value the personal freedoms and autonomy tend to have a very higher levels of contentment, and individuals are more likely to experience contentment and the life satisfaction when they have the freedom to make decisions in accordance with their values and the goals. Next is your cultural happiness and the technology. In the numerous ways, cultural pleasure and technology are interconnected. Depending on how individuals and societies perceive and utilize the technology, the impact of technology on contentment differs across the cultures. In some of the cultures, technology may be adopted as a means to improve the convenience, connectivity, and access to the information, thereby increasing the happiness. The social media, digital communication can actually strengthen the social connections and provide the opportunities for shared experience, fostering contentment in collectivist cultures that value the intercultural relationships. So we can say that the impact of technology on the cultural happiness pattern is varied. Some technology has many benefits. It has poses the new obstacles also. The changes in how people feel happy within their cultural context. So basically, technology such as smartphones, internet improves the communication and technology. Entertainment and recreation are actually a good experience with the technology. The digital divide, the disparities in the technology access and literacy can actually result in a digital divide. It also spoils the work-life balance because technology allows for remote work and flexibility scheduling. It has a potential to improve work-life balance and happiness in some societies and can disturb in the other. It can, however, lead to always-on culture, blurring the barriers between the work and the personal life and severely altering the happiness patterns. So at the end we can say the technology's impact on the cultural happiness patterns is nuanced and context dependent. The cultures that mindfully adopt technology, employing it to improve the communication, well-being and cultural expression may see a happiness increase, and the others who are not doing it mindfully may experience the reverse of happiness. Thank you so much.